Sophianic broadcast featuring visionary teacher John Lamb Lash.
Today is the 12th of April 2018. This is Janith Waite. We are on day 26 of this one Dover shift. The title of this broadcast is How to Know That the Charlotte Working is Not a Hoax. So this is the follow-up to the Charlotte Working, coming up to exactly 90 days since the ritual was performed.
And action-packed days they have been.
Yeah.
Indeed. In fact, some things have happened. And we're now going to make full disclosure of what has happened. And as we do so, you'll perhaps register our astonishment. Or maybe our astonishment will become your astonishment. There were certainly moments since January 14th, when the ritual was performed, was initiated, that we have been, what would you say?
Dumbfounded.
Dumbfounded, stunned, baffled, rendered speechless.
Questioning our sanity.
Questioning our own sanity, questioning our sobriety.
Questioning our observational skills.
Absolutely.
Questioning each other. Oh, are you gaslighting me?
That's right. That's right. You know, we wondered if we were gaslighting each other because we had some discrepancies in the perception of events that have transpired over the last 3 months. So this is the follow-up talk on the Charlotte Working, and it's a really important talk in the Radio Gaianym series, an outstanding one. And I'm pretty excited about being here today with Chini to go over this with you. So where do we begin?
Well, I think a good place to start is at the beginning. So let's just cover a bit of old ground.
All right.
So on the day of the 14th, with various people across the planet attending,
right,
taking part, and then the actual ritual.
That's right. So on that day, there was myself and 2 witnesses to the creation of the cording and then the rigging of the cording for this particular lethal strike, as it's called, the Kalika lethal strike.
The first thing that's noteworthy, and excuse me if I'm repeating myself, but I think it's important that we go back to the beginning to work through it. The first thing that happened, the first anomaly, let's say, was after you had loaded the strike, rigged the strike, you were then gently caressing the nail.
And I pulled my hand away
in your hand
from the nail, which was rigged.
Yeah.
I was still in the cording.
Yeah.
I was crouching slightly, right?
Yeah.
Very slightly. Mm. So you could say that the cording, the nail was rigged at about my shoulder height.
Yeah.
If I crouch a little.
Yeah. So I observed you gently caressing the nail, and as soon as you removed your hand very gently, the nail flipped.
To our great surprise of all 3 of us.
The nail flipped, but what happened was the sinker did not hit the ground. So
we were all really stunned, and of course the first thing that crossed our minds was, well, had I made a mistake or something? You know, had I blown it at this very important ritual?
I didn't think that.
You didn't think that? I did. Yeah, I did. So anyway, we accepted those conditions. The nail had flipped, but the sinker hadn't sunk. So then, we're going over 7 precise points here. We could make it 20 or 25 because I have in my hand here a meticulous record of what we observed, of the anomalies that occurred, how we questioned each other, how we doubted our own perception. I'm not going to take you all through all that because that would take 3 hours.
Yeah.
But we're going to cover 7 key points. That was the first point, the first moment. Subsequent to that, it was the Monday on which I was pondering whether to go back and re-rig it. And that's when I realized that I could re-rig it and that anyone can rig a lethal strike 3 times.
Well, you also realised whilst performing that ritual that a KLS, a strike, is not the same as a desideristic chording.
That's right.
A KLS, a strike, is like setting a trap for an animal. So you can go back and fiddle with it.
That's right.
3 times.
That's right. 3 times you can. So, also significantly, in the interim of the Monday, between the Sunday when it was rigged and the Tuesday when I went back with you to re-rig it, I had that dream, which I have recounted already, in which I saw a creature that I did not recognize, a fox-like creature with a blonde, reddish-blonde fox mane and a collar. And in a lucid dream, I encountered this entity and
killed it,
strangled it in a very particular manner.
And the creature was actually a griffin.
And the creature was actually a griffin,
which turns out to be
the totemic or iconic animal of a certain franchise, right?
The franchise in question.
So, second moment is, after that dream, we went back and the 2 of us and I re-rigged it with a second nail. Now,
because the first nail had flipped and
because
it was
we
gone.
couldn't down the first nail. So I re-rigged it with a second nail, and I'm going to post on the what do you call it?
The Charlotte working page.
Yeah, I forget what the term is. The tracking page for the Charlotte working. I'm going to post a photograph of the plaque, the plaque, for this TI. And you will see that it has 2 nail imprints. This is an anomaly. This is unusual. Have we ever done this before? No. And the second one is a crooked nail. I intentionally chose a more bent nail to distinguish it from the first nail. And the imprints of both these nails are in the tablet.
Yeah.
And you'll have a photograph of that. So, go back, we rig it with the second nail, and...
which took you an hour to do.
Yes, took me an hour. I did it extremely carefully and left it there. And on that day, another anomaly happened.
So we put on our coats to leave. You'd re-rigged it.
Right, I came out of the cording.
We put on our coats to leave, and then we held up the handheld app.
Right, together. And we were looking at the app, and just beyond the app, we were looking directly into the cording at the second nail. Yeah. Remember, there was a first nail, lost, the second nail when it was re-rigged. And as we were looking at it and doing the exercise of lifting our gaze from the blue spot 16 to the kill spot number 1, what happened?
The nail flipped.
The nail flipped.
But the nail did not land.
But the sinker sank.
Sinker hit the floor this
because
time.
I rigged it correctly, but the nail hung in the cording.
It hung off the cording like a person who was hanging.
From a rope.
Yeah, by the neck.
By the neck.
The head of the nail was slightly caught on the black drawing cord.
That's right.
And slightly swinging.
It was a dramatic image, to say the least. It, in fact, was a perfect image of that which we desired to achieve. Because if you remember, one of the lines of the spell uses the word strangulation. Strangulation, by the way, if you go into the background of the Mahavidya cult of these 10 goddesses from the Dravidian cult of goddesses, which was centered around Hyderabad in southern India, you'll find that these Dravidian goddesses, which are known to be desideristic, which is a fancy term derived from the Latin word desideratum, which means that which is desired. So they grant desires or boons, to use the old-fashioned language. And if you read Tantric Visions of the Divine Feminine, for instance,
which is a great book.
Great book, which profiles each of these 10 Mahavidyas, which are powers of the Shakti cluster, you will find that they are quite specific in the boons that they grant. And among these boons are to paralyze an enemy, to strangle an enemy, to strike them blind, to strike them dumb and make them unable to talk, and so forth. They're very specific spells that are cast by invoking the power of these Mahavidyas, right? Mm-hmm. So strangulation is one of the powers, I think, mainly attributed to Matangi in particular. So we thought this was a pretty vivid message, but again, you see, no one's ever done this before. No one's ever attempted this. We've done plenty of courtings. You've practiced more lethal strikes than I have. Mm-hmm. And we've done desideristic strikes, and we've seen them work in our lives, and other people have as well. Mm-hmm. Desideristic courtings to grant our wishes. But of course, this is a unique event because it's performed in collaboration with witnesses all around the world.
Mm. Well, again, it's the Wright brothers'
first flight.
First flight, isn't it?
That's right. So we took meticulous care to pay attention to every detail of this event, and we recorded it all, and it's all chronicled.
We didn't record all of it.
We didn't photograph all of it. Now, this is another anomaly which is going to come up as we advance here in our report.
Well, the entire experience has been a huge learning curve.
It's been totally astonishing. Mm. So let's move to point, I'm just indicating here the points that I've selected. Point 3, hangman nail. So the second nail, we call it the hangman nail, and it's hanging in the courting.
Like a body.
Like a body. Now there was an anomaly connected with that nail, which also caused us to ask if we were gaslighting each other, or even if we were gaslighting ourselves. And what was that weird anomaly?
Well, we both remember the nail as being a fairly straight nail, and you, like you said, you specifically chose a nail that was identifiable from the first nail because it was bent. But in our memories, the nail was fairly straight. Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I remember when I observed the hangman nail, sometimes something happens, and this is really typical, I think, of working with Gaian Tantric magic, which continually is testing your perception. The system of magic you undertake will test your sobriety and test your perception if you're performing it correctly. I remember looking at the hangman nail and thinking, wow, cool. I mean, that's really neat. And in the back of my mind, there was a question. There was a sense of bafflement in the back of my mind that never quite formulated itself into a question. But if it had, the question would have been like this. Hey, hold on there just a minute. John, you specifically chose a bent nail for the second courting, and yet the nail that's hanging in the tree looks straight.
Yeah.
And we couldn't explain that. We couldn't explain that.
But that was in hindsight, wasn't it?
That was in hindsight.
Yeah.
So I had in the back of my mind a nagging thought. I really want to go back and take a picture of the hangman nail.
But you never formulated that thought.
But I never consciously formulated it, nor did I ask you to go take a picture of it in my absence, in view of the fact that a couple of days later I went on a trip.
You went on a trip for a month, and that was your radio silence.
That's right.
And I ventured back over there intermittently to go and look at the recording. And the hangman nail, I reported back to you, the hangman nail is still there hanging.
Right. So for a month, from January 16th to February 14th, when I returned, that was the day of the Parkland event.
Valentine's Day.
Right. I was in the air when that event happened. I returned. The hangman nail hung in the tree.
except for the day before you got back, I went over there to have a look, and
You're walking down the path toward the cording.
it's not a path because that place is so remote and so in the middle of nowhere. Humans don't really go there, so I can't call it a track or a path. It's just the access that we have used.
That's right.
And about 20 feet, I suppose, away from the cording and the ritual, there's a dead fox lying there. A young fox, a vixen. And she was absolutely beautiful. And I picked her up and held her, and I examined her all over her body. There was no blood coming from her mouth, there were no signs of injury. It was literally like she had died in midair running because her paws were tucked underneath her body. And I picked her up, sniffed her, she smelled beautiful, and then I buried her near the cording.
In the ferns.
In the ferns.
And needless to say, we discussed this event at length. I want you all to understand that as Gaian shamans, we know exactly what we're doing. We are precise about the rituals and why the rituals are done in the way they are. But we are also keenly aware that we are at the leading edge of an event of novelty. This involves high novelty. The very idea that some of the magical children of the earth goddess, the wisdom goddess, could fight back against the enemies of life using her magic is itself a novelty. Mm. It's a novelty that has never been undertaken in the course of our species. Mm-hmm. So we're not only aware that the magic we practice and share with the world now exemplifies that novelty, but the faculty of novelty or surprise or uncertainty is always present in the process. You can't entirely control it. And the art of doing this consists in some measure in staying current with the anomalies and the novelty that occurs as you're doing it. And we had a huge lesson, wouldn't you say? It's been a huge lesson in that respect.
Yes.
So, just before I return, you see the fox. I come back, we discuss that. We relate it to the fox/griffin that I saw in my lucid dream.
And the fact that the TI used to have, before she became who she is now, before she was elevated by the three-letter
agencies,
had a fox-like mane.
That's right. We put all that together and we incorporate all that into our ongoing participation in this rite. So then I come back and I hear the story of the fox, and I have one thing in my mind. Well, the hangman nail's been there for a month now, exactly a month, and I really want to get a picture of it. And so I take the camera and I go out on February 16th, which is a special day to me because that's the birthday of Jan Michelle Kerouac. And I walk out to Charlotte's Ridge, and guess what?
Nail's gone.
The hangman nail is gone, and the drawing cord from which it was hanging is also gone. Now, I looked around a little, around the base of the cording, and I didn't see anything. And I came back, and I told you about it, and we recorded all that, and we wrote that down. So that's exactly 1 month from the first nail and the first rigging. Mm-hmm. Okay? Now, we come ahead into the month of March. And it so happens...
I did go back and corroborate John's observation that the nail and the cording, the rigging, the drawing cord had now disappeared completely.
Right.
I went back and corroborated also.
Right. And you looked on the ground, and you're a good detective, and you found no drawing cord and no nail.
Nothing.
Okay, so register this. Hangman nail, second nail, gone, not photographed. drawing cord gone. Okay? Then it so happens that, again, exactly a month later, and by the way, each of these events happens in what is called the lunar increment, the 72-hour period when the moon is conjunct Saturn, which also happens to coincide uniquely right now with the moment that the moon is at its apogee in the constellation of the Archer.
Mm-hmm.
We calculated recently there were about 16 precise component factors of timing that contributed to the Charlotte working.
Within that period.
Within that period. So each of these key events that we're describing happens at the new moon, in the dark of the moon, which, by the way, was a Mandela effect, right? That showed up exactly as this was unfolding. So now we come to the 16th of March, and a strange thing happened on the 16th of March, well, on the 15th actually, which was, we were sitting in the kitchen, and you asked me what day it was, or actually you said it was Thursday, and I said, no, it's not, it's Friday. And so you sort of lost a day, kind of a missing time.
I lost a day.
You did?
I lost a day.
Yes.
I was so shocked. That doesn't happen to me.
And on the day, after the day you lost, you decided to take a walk, as you often do.
No, hang on. I was going to take a walk. I was going to go somewhere, and then at the last second, I had this really strong sense, no, go and check the cording. So I went to check the cording.
This is Friday, March 16th.
And I came back from checking the cording, and
I'm here in my office where the studio is. I'm standing at the computer working on something. The door opens. You're standing there, looking like as white as the paint on these walls.
I know that I had that look of somebody that's just witnessed a car crash or some, accident.
I thought that I thought maybe something terrible had happened, or she had witnessed an accident, but while walking in the fields, I don't know how that could happen. And anyway, standing there, totally stunned, and then you informed me what?
I said, okay, either we've got some really freaky magic going on here, or we've really fucked up.
Yes, that's exactly what you said, I remember. And then you told me what?
That the cording had been re-rigged. There was a new nail now on a completely different tension line.
Right. We're calling this the third nail. Now, I trust that you out here who are following us are giving your full attention to what I'm telling you now. There were 3 nails involved. The initial nail, that second nail that became the hangman's nail, and then they both flipped. Then, it turns out
The mystery nail.
that there is a mystery nail, a third nail, and that the cording was re-rigged a third time.
And when you demonstrated the KLS on the Calico War Party video
Right.
that's available on YouTube, you always rig the nail and the drawing cord on a horizontal tension line. This new nail, this mystery nail, was rigged on a cord that's at a 45-degree angle.
And about eye level rather than shoulder level.
Yeah.
Right. The way that this nail, which was a straight nail, was rigged was anomalous in itself. It was not a way that I or anyone who practices these techniques would ever do. Particularly, it caught our attention, first your attention, then the next day I went back with you and we examined it together meticulously and took photographs. Mm-hmm. So we do have a photograph of the third nail. Mm-hmm. We were totally speechless. And we remained speechless pretty much for about 2 or 3 days.
I remember looking when I was telling you what I'd seen. I remember you searching my face, and when you work somewhere and something goes missing, so somebody's stolen something, so you feel guilty that something's gone missing. It's that weird thing that you feel because you want to help, and I could see you searching my face, and I was feeling like you were searching my face to see if I was gaslighting you. Actually, you said you weren't, but that's how I felt. It was such a strange... the whole thing was so strange and so disturbing, and...
We felt, let's be completely honest. I don't have to tell you that we're being honest.
We're always honest.
You can detect it if we're not. We felt somewhat ill at ease. We talked through this for hours,
Days.
inside and out. Days. And one of the things I said was that what's going to happen when the moment comes when I go on air and tell people about this, right?
Well, we even considered the possibility of not saying this.
That's right. I had deep concern about the possibility or the likelihood that us recounting this event to you that actually happened exactly as we're recounting it could be regarded as a make-believe act that we're inventing in order to give a supernatural legitimacy to this event. But I'm telling you that this is exactly what happened and exactly the way it happened. And so in recounting this to you, it comes around eventually to the point that I want to make. What proves that the Charlotte working is not a hoax? What proves that Ginny and I are not hoaxing you by falsely telling you that there was a third rigging and there is no explanation for how that rigging could have been done?
Well, okay, but let's go back to how we then dealt with this new revelation that there's a mystery rigging and a mystery nail appeared in the cording. So obviously we went through every logical solution. First of all, we questioned human interference. So there's 3 fincas, 3 farms within half a mile of that, and I happen to know all the farmers that have their cows around there. So we went through, well, what? So they have internet. Firstly, I doubt it. They might have. Secondly, they have internet, and then they came across your work, and they came across the Calicalitha strike, and the Charlotte working at the same time. No.
And they decided to put a hand into it just for the fun of it, right?
It's not possible.
Right.
The chances are 6 million to 1.
Another possibility was that the third party, who was witness to the first cording, first nail, first rigging, knew the place, could probably get to Charlotte's Ridge, although she hasn't been there that often on her own. So I asked her point blank.
Well, she's never been there on her own.
She's never been there on her own. I asked her point blank, did you go there on your own and re-rig this?
You asked her that after a grilling.
Quite a strong grilling.
Yeah.
Yeah. We took great effort to eliminate all possibilities. There aren't that many possibilities because, who could have known about this and who could have known where it was and who could have gone there and done that? So by a process of elimination, we came to the conclusion, and here I'm going to say it publicly on air, that the third and completing phase of the Charlotte working was executed by the supernatural agency itself. So take that on board.
And it's probably going to take you a while. It took us a while to get to that. Obviously, we went through every eventuality.
We did not come by that easily.
No.
But I am confident of what I'm saying. Additional to that, there is, in our possession, which shall be forever in the possession of the in the annals of planetary tantra and in my archives and in my legacy a nail. And this nail is proof of materialization.
Go back to, because I think it's an important point, go back to when I took you back over there, when I discovered the third rigging, the mystery nail.
The day after we went there together.
We went back there together, and you realised that it had not been rigged in the same way that you performed the rigging on the KLS video that you
That's
did.
right. It had been rigged with a hair trigger rigging, which is what particular technique of rigging. Mm-hmm. And so, if someone had watched the demonstration of a Calico Lethal Strike, which is on Calico War Party YouTube channel, they would have rigged it according to the way I demonstrated there, which was not the way it was rigged.
And actually, that's another thing that we've learned, is that the rigging that you demonstrated on that video is too secure.
Too secure for a lethal strike.
So the way that it had been re-rigged is not as secure.
No, the way it had been re-rigged is called a hair trigger rigging. It's like the hair trigger on a gun. The way that I demonstrated a rigging in that clip is called the safety rigging. It's like when you have the safety set on a gun.
Safety catch, yeah.
The safety catch. So this is another meticulous distinction. The non-human supernatural agency that performed the third rigging did it with a hair trigger rigging.
There's no other explanation.
No, there isn't.
So we got really excited by that. Once we got to a point where we can't take anymore.
Yeah, can you hear us moaning and complaining about that? We can't take anymore.
Because further things kept happening. I went back there. And
The string. Tell them about the string.
Well, no, you found this. You found the extra
Black cord.
black cord on the day that we went back, and I showed you.
Yeah,
the
when
new-
we went back together on the 18th, after the day that you came here and told me that it had been re-rigged.
And by the way, John had exactly the same look on his face that I knew I had the day before when he saw the new rigging.
So we're standing there. I'm looking at this nail, of which I am now in possession. Materially, I have this nail. And I look down, and I see this black cord on the ground. This loose cord. Probably, about 10 feet long. A couple of yards long.
Yeah, tied together, wasn't it?
And it's laying on the ground. And this is another anomaly, because it is unthinkable that I, or anyone who performs these rituals correctly, would just leave loose black cord laying around on the ground. And we didn't have that much black cord to spare, did we?
Well, okay, the story is, with the black cord, there was none. Apart from a small bag, a baggie,
There was none in our
a
house.
sealable plastic bag, a tiny sealable plastic bag, where I had brought them with me, that were already arm's length drawing cords, tied, and they were wrapped singly together. And you took, on the Sunday the 14th of February, the 14th of January.
Right, I took one out of the
You
bag.
took one out of the bag and you wrapped it around the first nail, and that was all you took with you.
I didn't have a roll of black cord.
No, there is no roll.
There is no roll. There is no spare cord. Yet I get there on the day after Ginny discovers this rigging, and there's loose black cord laying on the ground. Pick up the cord, and you know that a drawing cord is tied and is measured to the length of your arm.
Yeah.
I demonstrate that. I pick up this cord, I unravel it. It's looped like a drawing cord, and how long is it?
It's much longer than your arm.
Yes, it's more than another half. In other words, it's a drawing cord for a giant, basically.
And I'm petite, so my arms are short. And so all of the drawing cords that I'd already made up and were wrapped singly in this baggie are all my arm's length. This cord.
Was twice your arm's
And
length.
it's exactly the same cord.
That's right. So we don't know where that cord came from. And thanks to your detection, getting down on your hands and knees, how long did it take you to find it?
20 minutes.
20 minutes groping around under the cording.
In oak leaves and dried blackberry,
Briars.
and twigs and...
Right. You found the third nail.
That was the day after.
Right. You went back and you found it.
Yeah.
So
and I found it about 2 inches away from the sinker.
Close to the sinker.
We have a photograph of that.
Right.
We'll put it up.
So we've archived all this, and we have a nail. And now I'm going to remind you of something that I said during the Gnostic investigation of the Mandela effect. When I set up the talks leading to the decoding of the first supercluster, I said that the significance of this supercluster and why it's called the first supercluster and why it's so important is because it is a Mandela effect associated with material change. That is to say, the change in the Ford logo embedded in solid engine blocks, the change in the metallic emblems on cars. And I explained that how can you determine what would be able to cause material change of that sort. And I used the analogy of the seasons. And I said the power of nature that is obvious to everyone and is demonstrated to us through the course of the year is a power of material change. So, the planet, the mother planet, in her essential power, which is alive, shapes material life. It shapes the plants, it shapes the minerals. So she has the power to materially change the walnut tree from a bare tree to a tree with buds. The buds are material change. Then the green leaves come out, the walnuts appear. Everything that grows is a proof that the planetary animal mother has the power of material change. She has agency in the natural world. And also, over long periods of time, the change in the mineral world. She changes stones by erosion and by volcanic eruptions. So that, what I pointed out in the talks about the first supercluster, was the simple and obvious fact that that is the only power we know that can produce that kind of material change. And I infer that the same power produced the material change of the Ford and Volkswagen logos.
Yes.
And now, apparently, what's been demonstrated in this ritual by the supernatural agency actually intervening in the ritual is the materialization of a nail and cord.
Another cord as well.
And another cord as well.
So I go back, I can't remember when it is actually, but I went back again not long after and found yet another one of my black cords, so tied in one of my knots. This time it's wrapped around one of the trees that the ritual was done on, entangled in the bit of cording that's on that tree. I brought that back. So we have both of the anomaly drawing cords in this house, and that one was even longer than the first one.
Yes, that's right.
Same cord, exact same cord, but even longer than the first one.
That's right. So what's the takeaway of all this? Well, I wanted to entitle this talk, How to Know That the Charlotte Working is Not a Hoax.
But before you do that,
yes.
I think it's important that we talk about the mystery nail, because when it was brought back,
yes,
we got the plaque out.
Right.
The curse tablet. We got the curse tablet out and we put it into the two indentations that you'd made on the plaque.
Right.
It didn't fit the second nail, which was very bent.
Right.
But it fit the first nail.
It
Imprint.
fit the first nail, so we got really spooked at that moment, and we thought, well, wait a minute. Some force re-rigged the cording, rigged it a third time, and they used the original nail.
And I know it's going to be really hard for people listening out there to get their minds around this. Believe me, it took us a couple of weeks to get our minds around this, and only after going through every eventuality that could possibly have taken place for that mystery nail and mystery rigging to happen. So,
Take my word on it. I hate make-believe.
Yeah, I do too.
And magical thinking.
And lies.
And lies, which are a variation of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I do everything in my personal life as well as in my magical and shamanic life to avoid that deviation and that form of self-deception.
And we kept questioning ourselves. Are we letting our imaginations run away with us? Are we in magical thinking now? Thinking that a supernatural agency has re-rigged the third nail? Because the obvious answer would be it's human intervention.
Or it's something that we did and we're making up a big story about it in order to prove to the world that this is real magic.
We would do that.
I am extremely conscious, if you'll excuse that term, I'm extremely conscious of the likelihood that over the course of time, those who take an interest in what has happened with the Charlotte working will probably say that we were hoaxing it at this point, and that we invented the third rigging for whatever reason.
It's not in our makeup. There's just no way.
Anyone can say that they want, and I will, not even bother to argue with them. I'm just telling you, this is exactly what happened, isn't it?
Exactly what happened.
That's right.
So we put the mystery nail, which was rigged on the 45-degree angle tension cord.
At eye level.
At eye level. When that dropped and I found it after searching on my hands and knees for 20 minutes, I brought it back and we stuck it in the plaque. It didn't fit the second nail, but it kind of fit the first nail. So we thought, oh, okay, it's the first nail. We've got the first nail back.
But somehow it found itself back into the rigging, right?
Yeah. But then, a couple of days later, you sat me down
with a
magnifying glass and said, look, so through the magnifying glass, I could see that the nail didn't fit it at all. It didn't fit the first imprint that you'd made on the curse tablet whatsoever. It was too short.
And it was lacking a rounded place on the back of it. It was straight, like the first nail, but it was not a perfect match.
Not at all. And then we noticed there were a couple of anomalies, strange anomalies on the plaque. Some perfectly square, oblong, perfectly angled and straight-edged indentations had occurred around that first nail.
That's right.
Imprint.
That's right.
We have no explanation for that. We don't know what that is.
So there appear to be, on close examination, some modifications even of the tablet, the curse tablet as we call it. And there is, if you will, if you accept it, proof of materialization, as I described, talking about the Ford and Volkswagen logos, in the working of the Charlotte ritual.
Now let's move on to... not sure the time frame here, but it's after you've sat me down with the magnifying glass. Then the person who was an observer at the first rigging came to the house, and you then demonstrated how the new rigging and how it was rigged. You got she and I to hold up a cord,
right?
And you got another nail,
right?
And you got another black cord.
Right.
So first of all, you demonstrated the hangman's nail,
right?
How it was hanging, and then secondly, you demonstrated the new rigging.
How the third one was rigged.
So the hair trigger.
Right.
The hair trigger.
And we did all this to verify our perceptions and to compare our memories of what we saw.
Because this is another thing. All three of us had a different memory of that day, which, this is a given. If you've got 10 people who witness a car crash, the 10 people will give you varying witness statements to the car crash. So that's what we were finding, that all three of us had a different account of our observations of that first rigging.
Yeah, in spite of those subjective differences of perception and memory, we did establish to our satisfaction the veracity of certain events and the complete and unquestionable certainty of these events happening, proving that there was a supernatural intervention in the performance of the Charlotte working. For what it's worth. Make of it what you will. It's three. Everything happens in threes with the goddess.
And it was constantly threes with this Charlotte working as
threes
well.
Kept coming
threes
up in many
all the
ways.
time. Even to the point of a very fine gentleman who offered, a swordsmith who was present on that day with the app.
Present at a distance, yes.
Present at a distance, yeah. He made a artifact for you, which you're holding now, which is so beautiful, so stunning. So John and I recorded a little talk about these anomalies that we experienced after we'd come down off a ledge and decided that we weren't completely insane or gaslighting each other, and worked out there was no way there was human interference. We did a little recording just as a record of what we'd experienced, and then we sent that out to the people that we knew were present at a distance that day on the Charlotte working, which you called the crack team. Actually, we didn't know this person was doing it that day. It was only after the event that we found that out. And
he wrote back saying that in the process of...
He wasn't going to say anything.
No, he wasn't.
But after listening to the little recording that you and I did as a record of the events, he said, well, I wasn't going to say anything, but now that you've said that, I have to tell you that it took me 3 goes to make this artefact for you, which is a beautiful dagger with the Shakti cluster
inscribed on the blade. And VV inscribed on the haft.
Which is stunning. We love it.
And very, very sharp.
And very, very sexy.
Yes. So, back to the takeaway and a message that I want to give to everyone who is following the Charlotte working. How do you know that the Charlotte working is not a hoax? Well, in January of this year, on January 1st, when I announced threat display on the channel, it really initiated the Charlotte working. The Charlotte working is an act of magical threat display. I want to regard it in that way. At the time that I did that, I came to a certainty in my mind. Now, I'm not going to say that this was Dakini instruction. In some cases, I can't distinguish what I think from Dakini instruction. I really can't. They're indistinguishable. But I won't say it was Dakini instruction. I'll just say I arrived at a certain ripe age of my life, at a certain moment of performing a high act of tantric magic, with this realization, which I share with you. In the day and age of the archons, when they reach the consummation of their power, it will be impossible to distinguish any genuine act of tantric magic from a hoax unless you are involved in performing that act. To anyone who is not engaged in it, it will appear inevitably as a hoax, and it will fall away, and the power of it will fall out of their hands, and it will drop from their minds. So only those of you who take it seriously to heart, as if it was the most serious thing you ever encountered in your life, the most serious issue that you ever considered in your life, you take this to heart. If you are involved in the Charlotte working, you will be able to know that it is not a hoax. If you are not involved in it, it will be very easy to pass it off as such. And many, many will certainly do so, I'm sure. So that is part of the takeaway I want to offer in this talk. And I also want to say, this is equally important, that the comprehensive ritual of the Charlotte working is not yet complete.
Well, this is something that you got on the day that you were first escorted to Charlotte's Ridge.
That's right.
You got a download.
That's right.
You got the TI.
Right.
You didn't choose it. You got the TI.
Right. I never chose a target.
And you told me that day that the ritual only works if the target knows about the ritual.
That's right. The operative term in our shamanic jargon is the command syntax. What is the command syntax? Well, first of all, the command syntax expressed in computer language is C:\kill /TI. The command syntax for a shaman is a beautiful, elegant, and complicated construction, which includes various components in the form of a beautiful mathematical equation. And all the parts of the equation have to work together for the spell to be successful.
Yes.
So, the public disclosure of the ritual, the sharing of the ritual, the introduction of the Shakti Cluster app as a tool to participate in the ritual, the riddles announcing the name of the TI, all of this is part of a master equation. And in the totality of that equation, you have what is called the command syntax for the Charlotte working. And there is one final component of that syntax that must now be activated. The TI must come to know that it is the target. It must come to know that in its external and mundane life. How is that going to happen? I don't know. I troubled myself a great deal about this, as you know.
For a long time.
I put myself on the fence about this. And up until a few days ago, I thought, go ahead.
Yeah, up until a few days ago, you thought it was going to be up to you and maybe a couple of other people, and we had people ready to do that.
Right.
However, we lent somebody a handset.
That's right.
To travel, and they didn't have a handset, and they needed one to travel on a long journey. So we lent them, and at the same time in your life, you've ever needed a spare handset. So you're all set up to try and set up letting the TI know, and you were prevented from doing that because the one occasion in your life where you needed another handset, it wasn't there.
That's right.
So you were prevented.
That's right. I had the intention in the third interval of the lunar increment, which was just last Friday and Saturday, to do a little trickery and mimetic magic, whatever you want to call it, and doing so to leak onto the internet a rumor that would spread, and the rumor would eventually result in the TI knowing that it is the target of a magic spell. A real magic spell, not a fictional one.
Yeah.
What I was shown by the course of events and by the circumstances was that it's not for me to do that, and so I haven't done that. And so I'm informing you now that this is required. But I'm not telling you that I require it of anyone. I'm just saying this is a condition, and somehow it must come to be known in the mundane world, in the world of tweets, in the world of Facebook posts, in the world of the internet where the mother has hacked. It must be known, made known to the target, that she is indeed the target of a magic spell, of true magic. And when this is known, then the spell, the power of the spell will be completed.
So feel free
Yes.
Feel free to take part in that part of the ritual.
And do so with mischief, with playfulness,
and fun and
with
pleasure.
fun and discretion, and be mysterious, but keep it real.